In today's video, we will discuss variables and data types in Java. In Java, if we want to store data, we need variables. Variables are like containers which store data. For example, if we take a look at the slide, we will see student_id is a variable, and this variable is storing a value 1234 with the data type int or integer. Whenever we write or mention a variable, we have to start with its type, which will be stored in the variable. Then we have to name the variable and then the value stored inside. In the next slide, we will look into variables a bit more into details and see how the naming conventions actually works. While declaring a variable name using Java, we have to abide by certain conventions. There are restrictions on the type of characters that are used on a variable. While naming a variable, we are free to use any character from uppercase and lowercase letters, like uppercase A to uppercase Z and lowercase a to lowercase z. Besides, we can use the $sign or the underscore sign as well. Apart from these characters that are mentioned, we cannot name a variable using any other character type. Now, let us see a practical example of this. Firstly, we take a variable and declare its type int. As the type itself speaks, it will only allow any variable which is of integer type or whole number. So for our variable int number, we take the value 1, 2, 3, 4 and then put a semicolon afterwards as per the rules in Java after writing a line. We will now try printing the variable number, and if you look closely enough, we have only used the lowercase letters here. As you can see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 as our output, which means the variable taken was completely valid. Now, let us try printing the output in a slightly different way. Suppose if instead of int number we use int number $sign, can you assume whether the variable here will work or not? This will definitely work because it abides by the rules of naming a variable where we had uppercase, lowercase and $symbol too. Let us try and compile it now. As you all can see, it just works perfectly fine. Now let us take a character which does not fall under our naming convention. In the variable, now I will be taking the hash symbol instead of the $sign. Similarly, I am putting the hash sign in my print statement too. If you remember, we did not have the hash symbol in our convention. Hence, when I am trying to compile it, it is showing an error and the variable is not being accepted. If I break the convention by taking the % sign now, you will notice that it is once again showing the same error. Now let us try taking a mixture of characters in our variable name. Let us take the first character to be an uppercase and replace the hash sign at the end with underscore sign. Can you guess whether it will be valid or invalid? If we compile it and run, we can see it prints perfectly. Thus, it is completely valid. Secondly, we will look at one other convention. In this convention, Java does not accept a variable which starts with digits or special characters. Let us put a person symbol at the front of the variable name and keep the value 88 as the scribe says. If you all look closely, you will notice our variable started with a person sign, which violates the convention. Thus, if we run it, we will end up with an error again. If we start our variable with a number and we put the same number in our print statement and try to compile it, we will end up with an error similarly once again. Hence, in case of variable declaration, no matter what number we take for naming it or in the print statement, it will never work. So until now, we had a look at what kind of characters we can take to successfully print a statement and which ones are causing an error in our program. But we have to keep in mind that we cannot put a digit in the beginning, but we can put in the middle or at the end. For the same case, if I write 1 at the end of the number and then print the statement, you can see it is working just fine and compile correctly. We can also write the number 1 in the middle, but it doesn't look quite representable and meaningful as a variable, isn't it? That's why it's best to write it at the end. Now let us have a look at the case-sensitive agenda. For Java, variables are case-sensitive. Number 1, where n is smaller, but variable number 1 where n is capital. The values we take are 88 and 124 respectively. The two variables are not the same, of course. The first n is lower while the second one is capital. Thus, Java will be able to differentiate between the two and take them as separate variables. Now, let us try printing number 1 after compiling and running it. So, the value with the lowercase n has been printed. We can do the same thing with the second variable and see it will give us the value 124 accordingly. If we want, we can take multiple words in one variable. Let us now take a given number and take a value 20 and try to run it. When we compile and run it, we get an error because even though these are two separate words, we cannot take a space between them. So you must decide between a camel or a snake casing. So if you put an underscore in between the two words, it is called snake casing. And the second one is camel casing, where we give the starting letter of the second word capital. This is how we can mention multiple words using the two types of casing. If we compile and run now, you can see it gives us a perfect output by maintaining the variable naming convention. There are nitty-gritties to take care of. Whenever a variable is mentioned, it has to be really meaningful, so it can be visually representable and let one know what it's trying to convey. For single character declaration, it won't show an error, but it is wise not to walk down that path. Say for example, if we write only n, compile and run it, it won't technically show us an error, but it is advisable to write the entire thing or entire variable. There are certain keywords in Java which we cannot use as a variable. These words are called reserved keywords. Let us choose the default keyword and try writing it as a variable and see if it works. If you can see, the keyword has been written maintaining the convention. It gives us an error because we used a reserved keyword which is prohibited despite following the conventions. Replace the default with import, and see, this also shows the same error. To sum up, it is very important us to practice this convention thoroughly and remember them.